right, y'all. Welcome back to the channel. I have two special guests here with me today. We are actually in the middle of our vacation here in the Maldives, but they decided to bless me with their presence and some knowledge from their work background and whatnot. So here with my brother and my sister. I'm going to turn it over to them, let them tell you a little bit about themselves. We all grew up in Hillsborough, New Jersey, so we don't need to, repeat that. But they're going to tell us a little bit about themselves, where they live now, what they're currently doing for work, and then where they graduated college. So, Dan, you want to take it away?
We're going age before beauty, huh? So, Danny Humphrey, currently work as an HR director for the New York City College of Technology. I attended college at the University of Alabama at Birmingham, have 2 cats, and fun fact for me, I'm known for eating pancakes without syrup.
And for those that don't know him as Danny, his actual name is Victor, but most of his family, all of his family calls him Danny.
Yeah,
so.
I'm surprised you went with Danny.
Yeah.
So I am Nicole Humphrey. I went to Columbia University. I currently live in Los Angeles, where I'm an in-house tax attorney for an asset manager based out of LA. Fun fact about me, even though I was joking to them about my fun facts, I have a cat named Sub-Zero and a dog named Selma. I guess if we want to get really spicy with it, I played rugby. I've gone to New Zealand because I played rugby, and I went skydiving there. So,
Wow. Well, thank you guys. I'm very honored that you guys would come on my podcast. I know it's probably the first time that maybe you've been on film, so I appreciate it. Any jitters will probably get wiggled out as we get into the conversation.
you don't remember that Star Trek video that we had at Universal Studios
Yes,
way back when?
I remember that Star Trek video.
I might have to put a clip of that in there.
That's fine with me. I did not partake.
Yeah,
I'd probably have to find it. It's on VHS somewhere.
A clip of you and your prize moments.
Hey, I was a young star back then.
To put it lightly.
But no, so obviously I've talked to you guys about the channel, what my mission is, up to me. I really am big on individuals taking personal accountability for the decisions and choices that we have in this world. And so, I always begin every show with the same question. What does the word accountability mean to you? So I'll turn it to you, Nick, first, since Dan went last time. What's the word accountability mean to you? And then also, how do you apply it in your everyday life?
I mean, I think accountability to me means realizing the ways in which you might have been wrong. Like, regardless of what the circumstance, right? Like, to give you an example, like, if I make a joke and it hurts my wife's feelings and it upsets her, and she claps back at me, and I could sit here and be like, well, it was just a joke. Why'd you take it that seriously? Mm-hmm. But, like, I have to step back and say, like, wait a minute now. Something that I did hurt someone that I care about. Mm-hmm. And regardless of my intent behind it, I have to, like, really be introspective enough to, like, realize why I did what I did was wrong and hurtful, mm-hmm. regardless of my intent, and start to make amends and also, like, learn from that so that the next time it doesn't get taken to that level. Like, I can make a joke and it be enjoyed by everyone.
Yeah. Okay.
Like that.
Yeah.
Nice.
No.
For me, accountability is about being present in every moment, whether good or bad, up or down. It's really a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week job because we all have to be accountable to ourselves. But mm-hmm. in addition, when we're amongst others, we're accountable to them as well. In my professional life, I'm responsible for a department or a team of 8 people. And ultimately, their actions, good or bad, or if there's not a desired result, ultimately that rolls up to me. And it's got to be a scenario in which, even if I wasn't directly involved with the situation, I'm always the person who, before I go and point the finger, I'm going to point the thumb back at me just to see, well, within this, what is the lesson from this. I don't believe in wins and losses. I believe in wins and lessons. So from that standpoint, it's, well, what can I take away from this experience, personal or professional, that I can now carry with me and carry forward to hopefully not or avoid a negative or bad situation again.
No, I like that. Yeah, no, that was deep. I like that. I think that, obviously we have all done pretty well for ourselves, right? And, we're here in the Maldives. Obviously, this isn't your average vacation and whatnot. So what do you think it was about maybe our upbringing that impacted or influenced maybe some of the aspirations that we currently have? Like, so we all grew up in the same home, but it looks like we all kind of went different directions. We live on different parts of the country, but that, I'm in sales, you're more in human resources, and then you're an attorney. What do you think, I guess, from our upbringing inspired the path that you ended up taking, in your professional life?
For me, I think the biggest thing, thinking back on our upbringing, was opportunity. It was a situation where we grew up where we had access to many different things, activities, exposure to many different things. And I really think ultimately, at least speaking for me, that really inspired a curiosity to learn and explore more. And it's certainly not a situation where everybody grows up the same way, has access to these different things. And I think certainly, to our parents' credit, certainly our mom in particular, I don't think there was ever any instance where we were really kind of stifled or pushed in one direction or another. As she always liked to say, she wanted to put in her 2 cents on things, but ultimately it was really a situation where we could go out and figure things out on our own. And I mean, I will say, while being the oldest, I'm probably the late bloomer of the three of us, because it took a long time for me to realize I can get paid for running my mouth. I was kind of aimless after high school, but certainly figured it out, and here we all are now. But I think opportunity was a big thing.
Yeah. How about you, Nick?
Can you ask that question one more time? I want to make sure.
So how do you think, like, our upbringing influenced or impacted, the path that you decided to take as far as your career goes? Like, if I remember correctly, I think before you went to college, you wanted to be in the military, or you were in ROTC, or was that just maybe an avenue to get to school?
It was just an avenue to get to school.
Got it. Okay.
But I mean, in terms of, how our upbringing impacted, like, kind of where I, to Danny's point, like, mom tried her best to make sure that we had everything, and like, but I felt like that. I felt like we had everything, but, there were times that, like, I don't know if y'all had this experience, but sometimes you can see through the cracks a little bit, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, so how mom was really good at, like, stretching money and figuring things out. And that was great, right? We all benefited from that. We all had a lot, like, even in terms of, like, me going to the college that I went to, like, mom had a way of, like, making things happen. But I could always feel the stress on her. And I wanted to be in a position where I could have the things that we had and pay back to her what she had done for me, but I didn't want to have that stress.
Yeah.
I didn't want anyone to have that stress. I didn't want to have that stress. I didn't want mom to have that stress. I didn't want you guys to have that stress, right? And so, like, I wanted to be in a position where I could help out my family and help myself out. And that's kind of what drew me to, like, being a lawyer. And, like, I think early on, and I guess we'll talk about this more when we talk about, like, choosing your type of law, but, like, early on, like, you grow up, I was listening to Wes's podcast, right, and he was like, you're really argumentative and opinionated, and you, like, want to be a lawyer, and, like, I think a lot of people want to, like, be a lawyer and, like, save the day, right, and, like, I had a little bit of that, but, like, after a while, I'm like, yeah, I mean, maybe I could do that, but, like, that's not necessarily me, and also, is this gonna really get me the lifestyle that I want? And the answer is no. So kind of, like, I, like, shifted, I, like, got to the law, and I'm grateful and thankful. But yeah, like, that, the reason I got where I am is because of the desire to, like, have the opportunity to take care of people. And we can talk a little bit more about how I landed, like, specifically where I am.
Yeah.
But yeah.
No, I think, I mean, that was one of my biggest motivators. Obviously, Mom, you know, she struggled, and we all saw that she struggled, but she was very prideful. So she never really kind of wanted to let on maybe, you know, how bad situations were or whatnot. So, like, I know in the beginning, you know, that was a big motivator for me. I didn't know maybe what I wanted to do, but I knew I wanted to be in sales and write my own paycheck, and really, like, I wanted the pay that I got to correlate with the work that I was putting in. But it was all in the beginning for, hey, I want to get my mom out of a bad situation and whatnot. And I think that's kind of where we take in. But the advantage that we probably had was that exposure that I, like, talked to about with Wes. It was like, you know, we weren't well off by any means, but you know, there were some nights where we didn't have the electricity on in Woods Road, but I know Mom fought tooth and nail to make sure that we had the opportunity to be in Hillsborough and to have all the opportunities that everybody else had around. And so we got that exposure, and thankfully we did, because you know, that gave me aspirations to want more, and to, you know, all of us to be in a better situation when we got older. So do you think, how did athletics, how did, you know, I know we've all played sports growing up. Did that change anything as far as, like, hey, did we ever want to play at the next level? I know I did. I'll talk about my story after you guys, but, like, when was it when, all right, I don't think sports is going to be the future, so okay, I'm going to choose this path? Was that?
Well, for me, I think when the dream died, I'll say it was when I stopped growing up and started growing out. So from that standpoint, you know, when you peak at 5'9", you got to start making some decisions, because everybody's not going to be Muggsy Bogues or Spud Webb, much less, you know, at the weight that I carry with me. But I will say, in terms of that, you know, certainly enjoyed playing basketball in high school. You know, with that, obviously, might have been cut a little shorter than you guys' careers with things. But you have to, I guess, by force with that, you have to start kind of trying to figure out and think about, well, what's next? And maybe what was next for me at the time, well, I'm not going to be able to play professionally or at the next level, but is there an opportunity for employment in some way? Is it sports management? Because I think what draws all of us to sports is there's an element of competitiveness, of wanting to test your skills and ability against someone else, while also trying to see where you might fit in a team or social dynamic. And in a lot of ways, sports is really our first opportunity at trying to blend in and mesh together within a social dynamic. So there's certainly a learning experience there with that. But I think, you know, as things went along, you move away from the playing side, or maybe you don't stop playing for fun, but you got to realize, well, maybe your future is not in the NBA or even in the NCAA, and, well, what else is going on kind of around that where maybe you can still get a taste and be involved. Now, granted, as I mentioned at the top, I'm working for a college university, so I didn't actually end up, you know, in the sports arena, but there's still been a competitiveness with that, and a drive to start from going from the entry level of being a recruiter to a senior recruiter to an HR business partner to a senior HR business partner, and on to an HR director now over the last 20 plus years. So.
Okay.
I mean, for me, like, I love sports, but I think I'm a pragmatist. I'm not a dreamer, unfortunately. Like, that's just not my ministry. So I realized very early on that there wasn't really going to be, like, I wasn't going to be a professional athlete, just because I didn't really start playing sports competitively or seriously until high school. And, you know, by that point, some of the things that I was interested in, whether it's soccer or basketball, like, these other people around me had been playing since they were in middle school or even younger, and like are in the AAU scene. Like the skill advantage, was just up and up. And yeah, like I think there are a lot of stories and a lot of people out there who pick something up in their high school years and they work. I think Pascal Siakam and like Joel Embiid have like kind of like they came to the sport later in life, but like I'm a realist enough to be like that wasn't gonna be me. But yeah, and still I could still play my sports and kind of take a lot of lessons from those environments. I could also use that kind of like to make myself a more well-rounded individual, basically to colleges when I was applying, but also like mentally, like it is just good sometimes to just go run around with a ball or whatever, and like in a team setting. So from very early on, I knew that I wasn't going to be like a professional athlete. Like there was maybe like a hint of after college when I was playing rugby, and I was like, well, we all kind of started this at the same time, and then I was just like, yeah, people are out here just like going into bankruptcy to be professional rugby players. Yeah. And I was like, again, I'm trying to take care of my family. I like not my ministry. I have to hold down a job, and I have to, put my focus there. And I can't be sitting here like upset like that this coach is promoting, a friend of mine who, for whatever reason, he thinks is better than me, even though I'm like, well, I can do X, Y, Z, da, da, da. Like, I was like, too old for this. Too many other things I got to focus on.
Yeah.
Like, facts.
No, and I think that's like a big thing that I really want to talk to, just having a practical approach. Now, I think that can be different than being a dreamer per se. For example, like when I went to college, I always knew, all right, I want to be a physical therapist. Okay. Then it was around the time where they were starting to require a doctorate for physical therapy. And so then I started looking at the cost of college to go get your doctorate. Not to mention I didn't really like school to begin with. And then you start seeing the average salary of the PT. No offense to any of the PTs out there, but for me, the cost of going to school for that long just wasn't worth what the average, and even owning your own practice, you can make that six figures, but you were putting yourself so behind the eight ball just, going to school for it. So I like the practical approach, and that's the thing that I really am going to try to gear and have people aim towards. But as far as sports for me growing up, obviously football was my number one love. Was very competitive at it, was very good, but then finding out about having cervical stenosis, obviously those dreams were cut short. And I think, I don't talk about it often, but that definitely did something to me as a 16-year-old boy, thinking Humphrey's going to play football. Humphrey's going to play football. That's been drilled into my head, and I was lost for a little bit. Do you think that was
the first time you cried? I feel like that's the first time I remember you really
being
super devastated.
Yeah, no, that was that was probably the first time I was really I remember me and Mom were at the doctor's, and it was like, well, you're going to be a basketball player now. And it was the craziest thing is we went in there not even expecting, we were just expecting, wear a collar, you're good to go. And then he's looking at the MRI and he's like, look, you have a 90% chance of paralysis if you continue. So, yeah, I was devastated. And I don't think I think other athletes could understand, but there were certain people that were like, well, at least you have your health. And, obviously, yes, I'm grateful for that. But as an athlete, you're like, man, no, this is what I love to do, especially someone who played at a high level, though.
But even as athletes, but more so as your siblings,
yeah.
I mean, I won't speak for you, but I was devastated for you. I knew how much that hurt you.
Yeah. No, so I mean, it's not something I talk about often, but that's where I talk about up to me, obviously that hurt me, but that wasn't going to be the end of my story, right? It wasn't that I was more than that, and that's what I had to keep reminding myself as I grew up. So. But obviously there were other monumental times in our life. We did lose our father very early. I was just about to be 1. You were turning 4, I believe, and then you were
12, 13 years
12,
old.
13 years old.
Mm-hmm.
So what I want to ask is, based off of the way our parents raised us, right? Obviously, you have 3 kids of your own now. What lessons did you take from them that you're implementing now as a parent? And then what things are maybe you doing differently? And then as you answer that, can you also kind of tell the audience how you navigated losing your father early on and how that kind of impacted you as well?
Absolutely. Well, I think, starting with Dad, I think the biggest thing that I got to see up close and the takeaway was the value of hard work. I mean, I saw and witnessed this man be not only a full-time father, but also an office manager, commute from Piscataway, New Jersey into Brooklyn, fight the Belt Parkway traffic every day. For those that know, they know. But then meanwhile, come home from that, wake up at 1 or 2 in the morning to go and deliver the Courier News, New Jersey newspapers, on a paper route. And then even beyond that, add to now going around, I don't even know if Colorado Prime is still in business anymore, but they were a meat company where basically you could have meat plans of just different chicken, steak, burgers, whatever you wanted. But even see this man, turn around and go and sell meat plans on the side. And certainly we had the ancillary benefit of getting free meat, so we did have a deep freezer that was well stocked. So the value of hard work is the immediate thing from him. From Mom, I think it was certainly just unconditional love. Like, there was never a time, no matter what you told her or I told her or you told her, where there just wasn't, there might be disappointment, there might be anger, but there was never any point of where you weren't feeling, that love. Even if it was a situation where she might have put in her 2 cents around something and you went and completely did the opposite thing, still, it was what it was. That love was there. I, recall back to, before going to the University of Alabama at Birmingham, I had taken maybe a semester off, before committing to go there. And I can just remember there were certain people that would sit there and tell her, well, what is he doing? What's he going to do? He should be in school, this, that, and the third. And where I'm not saying Mom didn't agree with him, but there was always that faith or that belief that, hey, he's going to figure it out. And when he's ready, he's going to go forth and, carry on. So, that's something that sticks out in my mind, but definitely that unconditional love.
Yeah.
As far as for how trying to apply that with my kids now, it's certainly trying to instill those items, but also recognizing that these kids are not going to be carbon copies of me or my wife, for that matter. Mm-hmm. They're going to chart their own paths or what have you, and they're going to have their different things, that come out that maybe as parents don't love them, would prefer something else, or hey, maybe you could try to approach things this way or that way, but they're going to be their own individuals. And, so I think there's not really a difference per se, but I think the difference comes in where kids are just a little different, these days. So there's got to be even that much more attention given to them and attention to detail, while trying to also strike that balance of stepping back and letting them, evolve into who they're going to be, or come into their own, exactly in terms of that. And then to the last part of your question, certainly that's a day that, I won't forget, at all, from the idea of being in the backyard, in the pool, seeing him jump off the diving board and then pop up, but then struggle and labor and, go and sink down, and not being in a position to get all the way down or try to support the weight to pick up, to getting out of the pool, to run to the neighbor's house to try to get assistance, and just going through, just the myriad of emotions, and concerns, being at the hospital to a point where I think there was a moment in time where they might have had a pulse, so you get hope, and then, obviously things went, the way they went. And, it's definitely an indelible thing, but I'm certainly, obviously very thankful for the time I had, and, the lessons I was able to learn, and now even appreciate that stuff much more now, as it's looking, at what can I do to now put my kids in a situation where, they don't have to worry about anything, and realizing that, hey, you can juggle, more than, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, up to 10 things at a time, if not more. So
there you go. Well, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate the vulnerableness too. Yeah, no, we, I always said Mom was my superhero, and just because losing Daddy, losing our older brother, your younger brother Sean, her parents, and then I forget that you were in that 11, 12, 13 year age group. So man, it's commendable that you were able to kind of come out of that on the other end of everything, man. So I appreciate that. Nick, obviously, our biggest impact was Mom. Can you tell me just what was the most maybe impactful or insightful thing that you learned from Mom that has shaped your future and how you carry yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's similar to Danny's, but like what you would call unconditional love, I would call grace. Mm-hmm. And I guess my distinction is like the unconditional love is like, it's not easy, but it's almost obvious between like your family, right? But like grace, I think, extends to everyone. And I just think that like I looked at the way that she treated us, which was like, yes, like she would want to get her 2 cents in. Because I remember talking to Mom, and I was like, I was in New Zealand studying abroad, and I was about to go to Japan, and I had like everything paid for and planned. This is like when I wasn't broke, but I wasn't employed. Like I was in law school, so it was just like money means something to me. Yeah. And like it had just been like, it may be like a week or two after the tsunami hit Japan, and like there was kind of like, some devastation, some uncertainty. And Mom writes me this email and was like, I hope you've reconsidered your Japan trip. And I was just like, I know you, Mom. I love you. I'm sure you're worried. I'm going to ignore this email for right now and go on my trip. And I went on my trip, and I came back, and I was like, by the way, I went on my trip to Japan. Everything is fine. And she was just like, I knew you would do that. And I was like, okay. And she's like, I say things, and I know you all are going to do your own thing, but I just have to kind of just like, but I trust that you will find your way. And even if you do what I think is the wrong thing, you're going to learn your lessons from that, right? And it's going to make you better. And I just trust and I believe in y'all so much that like, as long as I get my chance to put my 2 cents in, you're going to make a decision and you're going to learn from it, right? And that's kind of how, like, I kind of take that into my interactions with other people. I even take it into my interactions with Mom, right? Like, if I get upset about Mom did something like, she took out a credit card in my name and didn't pay it off, and like it impacted my credit score. And I was just like, what is wrong with you? And then I had to stop and think.
You ain't the only one.
I had to stop and think. It's like, look, your mom. It's gonna be okay. It's unfortunate now, but we're gonna, you know your mom. You know what she's done and sacrificed. Sometimes these happen. You're gonna be okay. It'll be fine. And it was. But just like having kind of that environment, and even if Mom and I are in a fight about something, and like we both say things that hurt one another, like we'll come back, or we would come back and have a conversation, and she would be like, you know what? I understand what you were saying. I'm sorry, blah, blah, blah. And I'd be like, I understand what you were saying. I'm sorry, da, da, da. And I just feel like especially as a lawyer, right? Like where I kind of have to like interact and deal with people, and like in a transactional practice where we're trying to get a deal done and it's not as antagonistic as like what you see on courtroom dramas. That's just an invaluable resource of just being able to look, stop, and think about like other people's perspectives. And like, sometimes people aren't just trying to get one over on you. Sometimes they are trying to ask for something, or they're concerned about something. And it's like, well, how do I address your concerns in a way that also takes into account my concerns, So, yeah, I just think that sensibility about people and that ability and a way to react to people was something that I got from mom. And it's great. It's just great to be able to have a parent and just to be able to like talk to them and connect to them in that way.
Yeah.
You learn a lot.
Well, grace is definitely something I agree with, because I was probably my mother's biggest challenge. as we all know. I would disagree with my brother and say I was the late bloomer, but
yeah, I was also surprised at that. I was like,
yeah, but I think I'm getting payback with my middle child now. So
middle children are the best.
Yes, if you say so. All right. So then, professionally though, and I'll ask both of you all this: what do you think was the biggest challenge professionally that you've had to overcome in your life, and how has that made you a better man, better woman?
Well, take this. I think speaking for me, kind of self-advocacy, because I think we can talk about all the great qualities we inherited from mom. I think one of the ones that's not so great that I inherited was, being that person that kind of just took a lot of stuff in and took a lot of things in stride. So we're on the one hand, that makes you a very mellow individual. On the inside, there are certain things that maybe happen, and it's not just maybe one thing. It's kind of cumulative over time. And ultimately, it just eventually manifests itself in you just being very frustrated. But, so circling back to the idea of accountability and pointing that thumb back at me, I think certainly professionally and, some of the different work settings I've been in, it's, taking or reaching that point to really kind of speak out and just really, quite frankly, ask a manager, well, what necessarily are your plans for me? What's the pathway to development and evolving for me? Because certainly there was a hospital I worked at in Central Jersey for 7 years, and I mean, it just became really apparent within this group. There were maybe about 4 or 5 of my colleagues that every opportunity went to them for one reason or another, here nor there. I don't know all the machinations, nor do I care to think back and remember, but I ultimately, after just kind of watching for a couple of years, like, well, wait a minute. So they're clearing a path for this person to expand into benefits or compensation. Where is the angle? I'm sitting here, okay, recruitment, employee relations, but if I want to evolve my career into functioning as more of a generalist, well, how am I going to do that if there are never any opportunities for me to cross-train or be exposed? And I remember, talking to mom and actually her nudging me like, well, you need to go have a conversation. So I did finally go and have that conversation. And ultimately, basically got an answer to say, well, yeah, we'll look into stuff for you. But, ultimately there was not going to be anybody that would take on, or learn what I was doing to allow me to cross-train in another place. So, obviously once I got that information, figure out, well, this is not going to be the future home for me. And you take, you take your ball and kind of move on to the next thing in your career. But I think self-advocacy, if I can talk today, was, really that big challenge or that big hurdle to get over. And it still manifests itself from time to time, but I think I do have a much better handle, on that now in most situations, not all. Nobody's perfect, but.
It was always funny that mom would always give the advice that she would never do.
And she would tell you.
She would tell you,
like,
I would never do this, but this is what you should do.
Right.
Thanks, Mom.
How about you, Nick?
I mean, I think it's something very similar to Dan. Like, I think, him and I, maybe more so than you, like, are just laid back, go with the flow. Mm-hmm. Chin was telling the story about how I'm the plant that doesn't like to be in sunlight, right? Like, I thrive, just head down, do my work, whatnot. And like, I found in like my first job, I kind of, I didn't do a lot of work. I didn't really like pound the pavement and exhaust like what was the right fit for me. I just kind of was just like, well, I'll find something, and like I'm really smart, and I have everything's worked out for me so far. Like, I'll be in this position, and it will. And I got there at my first job at a law firm, and I was a litigation associate, and like everyone was just like so type A about everything. And I was like, okay, well, like, they'll talk to me, I'll learn, like I'll get better. And then it was just like, before I knew it, people were just like, well, do you not care? And I was like, no, I've never done this before. Like, are you not going to teach me? And it's like, for whatever reason, partly because, like I was just like kind of set in like easy mode. Mm-hmm. I thought I had made it, and I thought I would just kind of like continue getting by. Like, I didn't realize sort of like what was happening around me, or like what my peers were doing, and the standards that they were setting. And how, like, even if people weren't going to teach me things, I needed to go and learn and figure out how to go above and beyond the expectations. Yep. And so, that was like the dynamic. Plus, like, I didn't actually enjoy what I was doing. Mm-hmm. And, I would have probably tried to like force myself into it. But like, I think it was my first year in the law school, and not out of law school, so at the law firm, and Chin and I like went on this vacation to China. And I remember just complaining about, because I had told somebody like maybe like a week and a half before we were going that I was going to go on vacation to China. And he was like, well, actually, when people are going on vacation, especially out of the country, you send out a memo to everyone like 4 weeks in advance, letting everyone know. And I was just like, well, I didn't know that. And he put that in my review. And I was like, what kind of petty nonsense is that, right? And so I'm just sitting there talking to Chin and like telling her all these things. And she was like, I didn't realize how unhappy you were at your job. And I was like, I didn't realize that either. And then I just was like, I could sit here and I could try to make this work for the next 40 years of my life and my career, or I could actually like leave and go do the thing that I think I actually want to do. Yeah. Which like I had like, so I'm a tax attorney now, and like in law school I had taken a tax class in my 3L year, and by that time it was kind of like I was already on the path to being a litigator. So like I couldn't go back, or like the only way for me to reset was just to like leave, get this other degree, and then start like kind of my career anew. But like, it was worth it. Like, I don't regret the experience that I had at my first job, because it taught me so many things, right? Sure. It taught me about like how I can't be complacent, how like I kind of have to like elevate my like standards to kind of like match the people around me, because otherwise, what is the perception? The perception is that I don't care. And I can't use the excuse that I don't know, because like, who's spending the time on me when there's so many other people that do know and they do get it, right? So
it's crazy. So like, obviously you made that decision, like, look, I can either stay here or I can change. Like, at what point in the decision making process for you and even aspiring attorneys is it like, okay, I need to make income, but I also need to like what kind of law I'm in? Where is that balance? And I guess, where was that balance for you, and how did you decide, okay, like, where can I get both of these and satisfy both of these?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's kind of hard and complicated, because there are just so many, and I'm glad that Wes was on, because I think he can speak to kind of that side of like, I want to be a defense attorney, right? Like, I mean, I don't know all the specifics, but from what I know from other defense attorneys, if you're trying to like make it, defense attorney might not be it for you. Like, right? No. And I was saying, like, I think I went to law school at first with these like delusions of grandeur of like, I'm going to argue this case at the Supreme Court and fight for people's rights, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And that sounds all great. And my wife is one of those attorneys, and God bless her, you know. But I was like, I'm not trying to do that. I'm trying to like, you know, be comfortable. And so like I very quickly was disabused of the idea that I was going to be a public interest lawyer. But I think that those people are out there. You just have to appreciate like you can make money there, but it's not going to be like crazy.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it will be a bit of a struggle. And as you get more senior, those salaries do increase and it gets better and the opportunities are better there as well. But like a lot of people, even my wife, like when she came out of law school, she didn't go into public interest right away. She worked at a law firm. Like so many people get shuttled into law firms, right?
Yeah.
And so like that's kind of the experience that I'll speak to and I can speak to, you know, and in terms of finding your type of law, right? Like the reason that I ended up where I did was like I went into a program where they kind of touted like, oh, you can try everything all throughout the summer. But like actually that wasn't the case, right? They were like, okay, you get 10 weeks and you get 3 rotations of something.
Mm-hmm.
And so you have to like take a list. They give you a list of 20 things and they're like, choose 3. And I'm like, well, hell, like how is this helping me? Right. And like, and law school is not super helpful in the sense that like, so there are 2 types of attorneys, right? Transactional and litigation. Litigators are the ones that everyone knows. Those are the ones who are going to court. Objection, yada, yada, yada. Yeah. Transactional attorneys are negotiating contracts, looking at those, like whether it's like antitrust attorneys who like look at, like know the antitrust laws and like if there's a deal and it has to have antitrust approval or whatever, you're going to have somebody who's looking at that and saying like, okay, well, these are the hurdles that you need to overcome in order for your merger to pass muster under the antitrust laws, right? Or like just mergers and acquisitions lawyers who are just looking over the corporate contract and like kind of reviewing it and being like, these are the things that are standard, XYZ. I'm a tax attorney, right? So I'm looking at the tax provisions in the contract, or even thinking about the structure of a deal from a tax perspective. What is that going to look like to, you know, either the buyer or the seller of that transaction, right? So like that's kind of my wheelhouse. And like law school doesn't really go into that. It doesn't tell you what that is or what that looks like. So your best bet is when you do your summer at a law firm, right? And like even within a transactional practice, like there are all different types of transactional practices. And so like what my advice for young attorneys is always to, so it's kind of contrary to what I think most law schools are going to tell you, or even most law firms are going to tell you, which is like most law firms and places will say, we do everything. It's not true. Like I literally was just on a call like 2 weeks ago with someone who was like, hey, I have 2 offers, one from your law firm, which I love, like the one that I worked at before I went to LA. She's like, I'm choosing between your law firm and this other one, right? And I talked to her and she's like, well, this is what I want to do. And I was like, if I'm gonna be honest, I love my law firm. It was the perfect place for me. Don't go to it. Go to this other place, because the other place specializes in what you want to do.
Right. Yeah.
She was like, well, everyone has been telling me just go where the people, and I was like, I know everyone's been telling you that because that's what they told me. And it's like, you have to at some point discern, like, look, if you want to be a transactional attorney, there are places for you. If you want to be a litigation attorney, there are places for you. So that's the first hurdle, is like, what do you think you want to do and what you're inclined to? If you can find, I'm sure there are places out there that excel in both, and if you can find that, that should be your first priority if you are truly like undecided. Within those 2 things, like litigation is kind of like, you're just an assassin. So like you could do all sorts of litigation, and it's really like you are out there just, you know the art of argument, right? So you know how to take a set of facts and like find the like the rebuttal or whatever, or to kind of like not lie, but play with the truth, right? I'm not a play with the truth person. I'm like, what are the rules and let's follow them, right? So I'm a tax attorney, because tax attorney, there's no like getting cute with stuff. Like you can get as cute as you want. If the IRS says that's really cute that you have this interpretation of the law, can you pay me my money? And like so like nobody is pushing back on me, which is perfect for me, because I'm not like, I'm like a rule follower. These are the rules. I like to have my very like regimented, like this is what's happening, XYZ, you know? And so that's why I became a tax attorney, right? Like even transactional attorneys, there's still kind of like shades of gray and like argument and negotiation that they do and play with. Like with tax, it's like, for me, it's everything is much more amicable and everything is much more set in stone. And So like in order to kind of like find your niche within the different groups, I always say like think about how you think as a person, right? Like for me, tax is a lot of puzzle solving. I love puzzles. I love being like A plus B equals C, da 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 da. Some people are just like, well, like A, but you can see the shade of this, and so it's Z, and you're like, okay, well if you're like this more elaborate, like fanciful artsy person, like maybe you do want to do a contract negotiation or litigation, you know?
Well, because that's what litigation is you're arguing the interpretation of the law
Exactly.
and whatnot. And it's funny you brought up Wes. I think everyone gets a misconception of defense attorney, like, oh, I'm gonna be, not everyone is Johnny Cochran and all these big time attorneys, but for me, I'm like, okay, I don't think I could ever be a defense attorney, because when you get to the point where you're saying, hey, I'm gonna make it, at some point I feel that your morals are going to conflict maybe for you to make the type of money that you maybe are trying to make. Is that pretty much a fair assessment, you think, or
I don't know about that. What I will say is
I'm saying for the defense attorneys that are like big time and make it.
No, I mean like the ones that like the friends that I have known, like it's never been a question of their morals. It has truly been like there's just so much demanded on me, and I just like I can't, like that's the other thing about like why I wouldn't be in that particular like law. Like if something happens in my job, a really rich person loses a lot of money and they still have a lot of money, and sure enough I might get fired, but like no one's going to like no one's life is at stake, right? And so like people even if the money was good as for a defense attorney or anybody in kind of like that public, like the stakes are so high for what you're doing, and that weighs on people and impacts people, and in a way that like I don't know if that would ever like I don't know if the money would ever make your values shift or change or whatever, because you're just dealing with that. Like you might get numb, like that might be, but that might be the only way you can survive in that field.
Robotic.
No, absolutely. No, I mean, I did. It was great talking to Wes. It's not for me, like you said. Somebody's life in my hands. God bless him. There's people out there in the world that can do it. So, but I appreciate the practical advice for aspiring attorneys and kind of really like trying to find their niche. And then Dan, like, so I know you're HR director. I know we always talk about this and whatnot. And so like I've done a video on interviewing, landing the job, things of that nature. But you see resumes, interviews all day, probably. Where do you think the biggest misstep that people go with, either applying for a job, landing the job, doing the interview, or maybe even all three? What's the biggest misstep? And then what advice could you give to somebody that is seeking employment, and how can they get a leg up in their next job endeavor?
Well, I think if we want to kind of walk this down the line and start with applying for the job, I'd say first and foremost, follow directions. Where certainly a lot of times folks, most of the vehicles is applying for a position through a job board or a company's website or whatnot. If it's a scenario in which they've not only asked for the application, the resume, and the cover letter, give them all three. Don't be in a situation where you do 2 out of the 3, because 99.9% of the time, if they've laid out a directive like that and you don't meet that, that's going to be a sure way for the information you did submit to find the circular file, digital or otherwise. Circular file being a trash can. So that's first and foremost. The resumes themselves, in looking at them, I think really the biggest thing is just proofreading. And I'm not just talking about grammatical errors or sentence structure, things of that nature. A lot of folks with their resumes, they like to have maybe a goal or an objective statement. If we've posted a job and we're looking for an accountant, for one, if you have a resume that you're submitting that presents a goal or objective of being a pharmacy technician or phlebotomist, it most likely means that you haven't quite updated this resume in a long time. Or even if we were to base it down to something clerical or administrative, in nature, you want to make sure your goal or objective is matching the job that you're going for. And ideally, taking the time to curate your resume and evoke some language in there to borrow from the job posting or job description that just doesn't show that this is now and you may be just blasting resumes out everywhere if you're in a space where it's just, hey, I need to get something, but you really are doing yourself a disservice a lot of times if it's a scenario where you've got a general resume that you're just sending out to everybody. If we think about, generally speaking, at least in my part of the country, there are 4 bona fide seasons that we experience. And if you think of a resume like a coat, well, one coat is not going to be for all seasons. So I think it's just really taking that attention to detail with that. And then once and if it gets to the interview stage.
Wait, real quick on that.
Yeah.
So you're saying that objective statement should maybe not be the same if you're applying to this company A, company B, they may have completely different objective statements. Yep. Okay.
Correct. Absolutely. So, and again, that's just in really going through to, pay that attention to detail. Come back in, as I was mentioning now, when it comes to an interview, when you advance to that stage, you want to focus in on the job that you're there interviewing for. I've seen too many examples of where maybe we'll call it folks maybe getting out a little bit over their skis, and it becomes not so much about the job they're interviewing for, it's about maybe the job that is 1 or 2 jobs away from that within the company. And quite frankly, in most cases, that's not what a manager wants to hear. They want to hear more about what you can do for them in the role that they've brought you in to interview for, not necessarily the job that is maybe a year or 2 away or through promotion. And I'll never forget, there's one particular experience that just sticks out in my mind. I remember interviewing a gentleman for a receptionist position with a radiology group or whatnot. Went through the whole interview, the screening or whatnot, and the manager wanted to move forward with the managerial interview, or I should say the director interview. And he used to always want me to sit in on these interviews with him. And through sitting in on the interviews, I could pretty much just sit there, because he liked to make offers on the spot, just verbal offers right on the spot. Never mind actually sending an offer letter or anything of that nature. But so I go over to this interview with this gentleman, and he's going through, he's answering the questions. We go through, and gets down to one last question. I'm almost just sitting in my head, all right, he's going to make this verbal offer, and all right, I'm going to have to fast track this paperwork and do A, B, C, and D. He asked this gentleman one last question to say, well, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And that's a pretty benign question, but I feel like it's a question that's almost like a gotcha question if you let it, because what this gentleman proceeded to do was answer the question to say, well, I see getting this job here, and at this particular site, you were eligible to transfer to another area after 6 months. So to give some context, well, I see myself getting this job here, working for 6 months, and then I'm looking to transfer over to this other area and just go on and build from there. And like literally within a matter of 5 to 10 seconds, that went from, well, yeah, this verbal offer is going to happen, to no, thank you very much for coming, have a good afternoon. Oh, wow. Don't think you're a fit. And just to kind of put a bow on that particular situation, because I'm sure the candidate, he felt there was a sudden shift. And I actually saw him 3 weeks later at a bank, and he comes up and he's like, hey, I know I didn't get that job, and I thought everything was going so well. What happened? And it's just like a word of advice going forward. And I say this with all due respect to say there's nothing wrong with anybody having aspirations, and everybody should have aspirations beyond an entry-level job or a lower-level, job. Dream big, definitely. But when you're in an interview and in the moment, Be there and present about that job that you're interviewing for. You got to keep maybe some of those aspirations a little closer to the vest, because ultimately you're trying to secure this opportunity. Once you secure said opportunity, then all right, you still unpause your planning and things of that nature. And if it was this particular scenario, well, if you get this job and things take the course of growth and evolution, then that's great. And, that's by design. But again, I just find that folks that are doing interviews, they want to hear about what you can do for them right now with the job opening they have, not necessarily the job that's 1, 2, or 3 jobs down the line. So in terms of job seekers and things of that nature, and I remember watching your video, and it walks through everything from being professionally dressed, doing the research on the company, things of that nature. But last and certainly not least is, interview for the job you've been invited to interview for, not necessarily a different job or a future job.
Well, don't self-sabotage should have
Right.
been, I guess, the last.
Right.
Because even, so that question could be a gotcha question, but there's also, why are you leaving your current job, which some people end up wanting to leave their job and they get an emotional rise out of leaving their job that they start diarrheaing of the mouth of why they hate their employer.
No, and there's also the element, you raised a good point, of kind of being too truthful when it comes to things, or at least what your truth is, whether it's you never really want to go into an interview bad mouthing the company that you're coming from. It also needs to be a situation where you kind of need to toe the line with maybe volunteering too much information about your personal life, because where obviously, there are certain things that someone might volunteer that, we certainly have, the Equal Opportunity Commission, we have the Americans with Disabilities Act, things of that nature. But there is a little bit of a gray area in between, where if you're somebody that's coming into an interview and going through, a recent interview we had with somebody aspiring to be a public safety officer at the college. And these folks, or this particular job, you're going to get a schedule, but the college reserves the right to change that schedule at any point to meet operational needs. So you basically need 24-hour, 7-day-a-week availability. So the person that walks into that interview, and if they're asking you, hey, are you available to work overtime as needed? Well, the answer can't be, well, I work this place on the weekends, and then so I would only be available during the week, during the day, because I have a family at home to raise, and so maybe 3 or 4 days out of the week I can work, because hey, during the week I'm going to need at least 1 day off to recover. That's just a little too much information. And again, I almost feel like I'm kind of giving away some secret sauce, because next thing you know, people will go in to interviews, tell a company or an employer what they want to hear, and then once they get in the door, you're going to have these issues. But I will say, on the contrary with that, where something like that could go, and it would certainly maybe be more of a headache for a department, and by extension for my office in HR, but you can have somebody that maybe they go through that interview, they're selected for that security officer position, and then maybe they use their right to request a reasonable accommodation that a department would have to look into, and at least have an interactive dialogue, as far as what we call it, with the person, to see if that could be accommodated. So, again, that's a little bit of secret alpha, but again, ultimately what it comes down to is secure the job you're there to secure, and then worry about, some of the mechanics or future aspirations
afterwards. Later. Nick, what was your first job?
Probably Kmart.
Kmart,
right?
As my first job. What was yours then?
You got that job because of me.
Yeah.
They're not even open anymore.
Because I don't think there's anything in that building still.
Good times.
It's had its time to go. It's had a couple places or things in that building.
Yeah. So where do you think? Because someone asked me this, and I really didn't have an answer. where do you think we learned the acumen to dress professionally for an interview and things to do, or do you think it's just been trial and error through us kind of going through our careers? Or can you guys point to anything? Because I couldn't.
Well, when you say dress professional, like, are you just talking about
Well, just the thing, like even the steps that I went through on how, like, I feel I've gotten better at those through the years. But I mean, I never went into somewhere as like y'all hiring with nothing, with you know, without some type of professional attire on, like, and I don't know if I got that. I mean, I can remember mom saying, "Hey, make sure you," do, but I don't know if I could pinpoint a time.
I also don't think that, like, for like Kmart and stuff, like I don't know about for cost cutters, but I don't know if I like dressed up in a suit or anything for Kmart.
Well, I definitely went to my interview with cost cutters. You know, shout out to Chuck Patterson, wherever you're at. Thanks for the hire. But I definitely went in a shirt and tie and some slacks, not a full on suit. But my theory kind of around that, you know, with this question is the idea. I mean, I think that was just something that just was kind of instilled or passed down through the generations. That, I mean, whether it was an interview, a special occasion.
Was there like a home ec class or anything that like went over one of those?
Sew your own suit?
Yeah.
No, just like, but I wonder, because you know how sometimes like gym had like life skills, like there were some life skills,
but
like,
not that I remember. I mean, I just think, like I say, I mean, it was certainly something that was passed down. I do think, and will say, we're in a space with you know, so much of the digitization of things at this point, where it's maybe kind of loosened the reins a little bit in how somebody presents themselves for an interview, because your interview, it may be virtual, or things are just kind of maybe in a space now where you know, the dominant generation now and the generations coming behind them, there's maybe not so much stock put in a personal or professional appearance versus you know, what somebody says the content of their answers, or you know, even what's in a resume. So I do think we're kind of moving away from that, but I think it's just kind of along the idea of whether it's putting your best foot forward, or if like, look, this is my shot. I want to make it my best shot, and I want to put myself in the best position to have a successful outcome and a successful venture. Then, you know, I'm gonna look to take those steps to present myself accordingly. I'm not saying that everybody needs to do that, depending on what type of job you're going for, but you know, I definitely think, you know, with technology's advancement and things, we're really kind of moving away from the whole idea of really a quote unquote professional attire.
Yeah. Well, I just don't give people a reason.
Right.
And, you know, and I don't think that dressing professionally can't hurt you.
No.
In the process. Right. More so than someone expecting you to take some care in the, you know, what you wore to the interview, and it's like, okay, now it might even be a non-starter for you regardless of what you say. So no, just that's what I say is don't do something, just don't put it in the person, because we're humans, we have biases, there's things that are going to happen, so don't leave anything up to chance.
Yeah, and I mean, you know, and so, I mean, with that, I've certainly kind of, you know, in everything, we all perceive things differently, but there usually is a general understanding of maybe when somebody showed up dressed for an interview, or they showed up like they were going to the club. And I know there have been many instances in which, you know, I've told people it's probably going to be in your best interest to go home, reschedule this interview, because, you know, while it might be a matter of opinion, you know, you're not necessarily, you know, dressed in the most appropriate way for this interview. And I mean, certainly a lot of folks have taken me up on that. And, you know, granted, not everybody's, you know, landed the job they came in back to interview for, but, you know, to your point of not giving a reason, it certainly didn't hurt them in terms of, you know, those folks that landed the job. So,
but I just see it. I see it more commonly that there's just certain acumen that was not taught, or And so that's where it kind of sparks my interest of like, I don't know where, and I've obviously just sharpened it through the years, but I mean, hopefully my video might be that spark of information, since like you said, the digitalization, information is out there now, so people just got to seek it. What so and I'll ask you guys this, and then we'll kind of wrap things up here, but what does success look like for you? What would you, someone says, Nick, I want to be successful. What does that word mean to you? What would your definition of that be?
I think success for me means, and we've talked about, I've brought this up a lot over like our vacation, is like, I think people need to get to the point where like, I don't need all the money. Like when you get to a point where maybe you could be making more, but like, what is it going to cost you to make more of that money, right? Like, are you neglecting time with your family? Are you neglecting starting a family or having a family, right? Like, what is it when you get to the point where you're like, I can live comfortably and take care of me and mine's, like, I think that's success. You could get more, but like, you always have to be in a position where you get to the point where you can enjoy the things that you've earned for yourself. And so getting to that point where you can like kind of ease up a little bit and just realize and appreciate like what you have around you. And like, there's no certainty or guarantee that you're always going to be in that state, but like having the resolve and the resiliency to be like, look, if something happens tomorrow and I lose my job, we've got a plan. I've got a lifeboat. I'll make it until the next thing, and have the confidence in yourself to be like, I'll find something. Something will happen. Like, that to me is success. Yeah.
How about you, Dan?
So success visually, quite honestly, you guys can't see the view I'm looking at right now. But, success is looking pretty nice. But I would say my definition of success for me is being in a position to judge whether something was successful or a lesson by my own means and standards, and not somebody else. Realizing that there are other options out there besides just say the cookie cutter 9-to-5 job, and just, being in a situation where you realize there are those options, but also, just there's success in just taking a leap of faith. I think as well, and we're not going to, go off too far off the rails here, but I mean, I think, one of the personal successes that started me, on this track, because I happen to be a crypto enthusiast, as well. And just speaking to the idea of, being in a space where you can not just make money, but replicate the process of making money over and over again of your own accord. And, in a sense, to kind of borrow from what you said earlier about writing your own paycheck, and just realizing you took the leap of faith of where most of the crowd is going this way, you kind of took a leap of faith and jumped into something, to really kind of learn, more about it. And now, you're building yourself and evolving in a space where, again, this now becomes just one more thing just in your wheelhouse, to ultimately, I think the ultimate success, to put a cap on this, is being in a position to trade less of your time for money.
Yep.
And not be in a situation where you're trading, 8 to 12 hours a day, and most of the money or the revenue that's being generated is going into somebody above you's, pocket, and you're making them rich, rather than enriching yourself, whether it's, financially, personally, or professionally. So, it's kind of continuing down that path. And I think, Nick, like something you mentioned, where it's maybe it's not necessarily about having all the money, but it's about having enough money to say where, if I need to do this or need to do that, I got that. And, it's not going to hurt me. There's an old Jay-Z and Kanye West song, and there was a lyric in there that says, difficult takes a day, impossible takes a week. And when you're in a space or in a mental mindset where you feel like for everything that you have going on, something that's a challenge is maybe only a day, a few days, or a week away, and not something that is light years away, it's a really empowering feeling. So, that's what I think of when it comes to success.
Damn. I like that. For me, obviously there's a level of, I think, monetary comfort that, is involved with success. But Nick really kind of said something that I remember a guy talking to me. I just had an interview with him, and he said, man, I'm successful if my kids look at me and I'm their superhero. And I'm like, damn, man, like that's a interesting perspective on things, because that could be someone's definition of success, where it's just like, as long as my kids look at me, they're proud, they know, who I am and what I stand for and the values and morals that I have, I've lived a successful life. So I think, that personal and financial can come into play when you talk about the definition. All right, questions for the host. You guys have the opportunity to ask.
You can go first.
All right. Well, my question, and I mean, certainly I think we can share, I'll speak on behalf of both of us. We're honored to be here today and have the opportunity to speak with you on your podcast and just kind of be part of this journey that you're taking. But I think for you, what I would want to know is, with this platform that you're building and growing out, what's maybe the one thing that you're really hoping to have come through and reach people? Because certainly you're providing guidance, perhaps financial coaching in the future, among other things. But what do you want? Let me rephrase it this way. So obviously, you saw something that drove you to say, hey, I need to put together a platform and vehicle like this. What's maybe the one thing for people coming up behind you that are going to watch these videos or seek your assistance? What's maybe the one fatal flaw that you want to stomp out, for people that maybe are kind of self-sabotaging themselves?
Yeah, I like that. I would say the one thing that I want people to take out is that you're better than your current circumstance. And that's what Up to Me is really stands for. I believe that we have choices in this world, and we have to react in different ways sometimes to some of the negativity that comes in our life. And, when people watch our videos, I want them to, one, see how I'm interacting with people who are in different career fields and whatnot, but also then learn different things, take information out, see other people who went through trials and tribulations and say, you know what, it's not just me. My situation isn't unique, right? I can make decisions for myself to put myself in a better situation than I am now. And so that's the biggest thing that I want people to take out of my videos. And I've always heard from people, hey, you're a very influential guy. You should do something. You should public speak. You should do something along those lines. And so, it takes me being able to get outside of my comfort zone to be able to then spread that message to other people that, there's greatness outside of your comfort zone. And that's not to say I'm where I want to be as far as the podcast goes, but I'm working towards that. And every day I'm taking one step in front of the other. And I want people to see that. I want people to see that, hey, hold me accountable if I haven't put up a video in a while, and shoot me a message and say, hey, Brian, we haven't seen you. We haven't heard from you in a while. And that just reinvigorates me to stay true to my message, stay true to being accountable to myself, to my audience, and all the people that do look up to me as an inspiration and as somebody who's going to be giving guidance. So,
I mean, I guess a little along those lines, do you have maybe practical steps or guidelines for people? Because I feel like there could be a point where accountability, or even working really hard at your job, takes a toll turn for the worse, right? Where you could go inward and start beating up on yourself a little bit too much, or even being like, you know, let me just work in this job and they'll notice me or whatever. Like, kind of what are the practical steps you would tell people, just kind of like to tell themselves, to like talk themselves up to like either realize they're in that position and how to get out of it, or even just how to get out of that position? If you, I mean, I assume you think that they should.
No, I definitely suffer from that where I'm too hard on myself, but I think it's a level of patience, right? And that's what I would say is it's the level of patience that you have to have, that, you know, you're not going to maybe if your goal's to lose 50 pounds, right? That it's not going to happen in a week, right? It's just to be better than who you were yesterday. I'm doing something in the direction that I'm trying to go in. So so my practical steps is figure out that goal and then devise a plan on how to get to that goal, and just grade yourself on where you are today. And then the next day, grade yourself on where you are that day and see if it's better than it was yesterday, and just continue on that path. And eventually, by doing those little steps, you'll get to that promised land on what that goal is. And so, I mean, you know, I'm hard on myself a lot, but I think that's my weakness, of just being patient with myself and just remembering, hey, do something in the direction to where that goal is, and eventually you'll get there. So I think that's, if I answered it correctly. So
that's what's up.
Well, hey, I love you both. I appreciate you taking time out of vacation to bless me with your presence on the pod. We on vacation.
Where my royalty check?
Yeah. Oh man, no. I'm super proud of both of y'all. I think Mom would be proud that we're on the trip together, and you know, I hope to inspire others to step out on a limb. I know I talk to you guys all the time about it, but to just face fears and just live up to your potential. So, everyone, I appreciate you tuning in. Go ahead and like and subscribe to the channel. Happy that my brother and my sister could bless me on the channel, and we will see you next time. Take care.